Well, some of you know my husband, Anthony. Actually, you all do, because he was the guy who was just standing up here. And Anthony is what a lot of people might call a type A person. He's a numbers guy because in his words, the numbers don't lie. There is a right answer, and then everything else is wrong. You can imagine how well he did with the current elementary math curriculum. But this guy also loves himself a good routine. Every Sunday, he lays out 5 shirts for the week, and he irons all 5, and then he wears them in order of how he ironed them. That is just the way of Anthony. And when we first got married, and I promise you, I am not making this up, he would line up 5 paper lunch bags in the kitchen. He would get out 10 pieces of bread, and then he would make 5 lunches for the entire week. And then every day, he would grab a lunch bag, and off he went. Now, according to Mr. Math, lunches consisted of 4 items and 4 items only. Those items were a sandwich, chips, a cookie or some kind of sweet treat, and a drink. And yes, in case you're wondering, the sandwich bread did dry out by Friday. And yes, the other piece of bread that had the mayonnaise on it got super soggy. And so yes, the dry and the soggy canceled each other out, making a good enough sandwich on Friday afternoon. Well, one Sunday, knowing that I had a first grade field trip the next day, Anthony graciously offered to make my lunch for me, which was fantastic because I actually loathe lunch making. My children started making their own lunches in first grade. It builds character. Right? Right. But less about me. This is all about Anthony, all right? So he says to me, turkey or ham, turkey. Cheese or no cheese? No cheese. Potato chips or Cheetos? Cheetos, obviously. Then I said, can I have some carrots too? Long pause. Instead of what? No, not instead of, in addition to. And another pause. And I watched the man's mind actually explode. And he just stared at me because a good lunch consists of exactly 4 items, not 3, not 5, 4. And we were at a crossroads. And I wasn't sure the marriage was going to make it. And we laugh about lunch rules, but what about when this same kind of either-or binary thinking shows up in our faith and in our politics and in our relationships? When we feel like we have to choose between this way or that way? What happens when we feel like we have to choose a side? When the world shouts that you're either with us or you're against us? There was a Franciscan priest who wrote these words. He said, "The dualistic mind upon which most of us were taught to rely is simply incapable of the task of creating unity. It automatically divides reality into binary opposites and does almost all of its thinking inside of this highly limiting frame. It dares to call this choosing of sides thinking because that is all it knows how to do. Really good thinking, then, becomes devising a strong argument for our side and against another side, race, group, political party, or religion." And I'll be honest, those words are still bothering me because it's true, isn't it? We humans are binary thinkers. It's either this way or it's that way. Either I'm right or they're right. Either this is true or that is true. A few weeks ago, we heard a message called Waging Peace by Phil Eubank. And I highly recommend you go back and watch this. And in this message, Phil outlined that the way that we win this fight that we're in is not by waging war with others, but by waging peace instead. And that just got me thinking that with Jesus, it's never religion or politics because he offers a different way, a third way. Phil said that if I don't publicly and vocally take their stand, their way on their day, then I'm a coward. And if that wasn't enough, then he went on and he said, it's the image our culture is spending trillions of dollars to deform us into. So today we're going to look at a time when Jesus was asked to take a stand. And what he does is stunning. So let's set the scene. It's early morning in Jerusalem during the first century. Jerusalem at this time was part of the Roman Empire, which means that tensions were high. Political and religious tensions were very high. There's a new teacher on the scene who had captured the attention of the elite Jewish leaders. And Jesus, this new leader, a new teacher, is teaching in the temple courts. And the crowds gather around listening. And then out of nowhere, this commotion breaks out. And a group of religious leaders burst through, dragging this woman through the crowd. She's disheveled, and she's terrified, and she's humiliated. And they throw her down. And in front of Jesus, they say, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say?" So we need a little context here to help us understand what's happening. This isn't about the Jewish law. The Pharisees, these religious leaders, they weren't concerned at all about justice. It's all a setup. It's a trap. Will Jesus pick the way of the Jewish law or the way of the pagan Rome? If Jesus says, "Stone her," then he loses his reputation for compassion. And if he says, "Let her go," then he breaks the Jewish law. It's a no-win situation. And they're forcing him into this binary thinking: law or love, grace or truth, condemn or condone. And everyone's watching to see what Jesus will do. Whose side will he take? Sound familiar? See, we live in that same kind of tension every single day. Social media, politics, family, even the church. Pick a side, draw a line, make your point, prove your loyalty. Hopefully we're not dragging people publicly into squares to humiliate them, but maybe we've dragged some names through conversations, or we've canceled someone on social media. It's easier than ever to choose sides. But see what Jesus does next. See, instead of reacting, Jesus kneels down. He stoops to the ground and he starts writing in the dirt. And let's just pause here for a minute. Can you even imagine what was going on in everyone's mind watching him do this? The Pharisees, the crowd, the woman who is now at eye level with this crazy teacher who decided to postpone his judgment on her so that he could play a little game of tic-tac-toe. Now, scholars that are much smarter than me, they have debated for centuries what Jesus wrote in the dirt. A lot of people think that maybe he wrote part of the 10th commandment: "You shall not covet your neighbor's wife." But the reality is, as of today, because TikTok didn't exist back then, we just don't know what he wrote. He might have written that 10th commandment, but he could have also written something else. See, in the first century, Roman judges would actually write out their sentence of the accused before reading it aloud. And so perhaps that's what they thought that he was doing. But the point isn't what he wrote. It's that he stopped. Before he speaks, Jesus stops. He slows everything down. And what if that's part of the lesson for us today? That before you pick a side, you choose to pause. Our culture wants uniformity. It convinces us that it's worth losing everything that matters to win the argument at hand. But Jesus desires unity. And he was willing to suffer so that he could bless and serve others. Binary thinking demands that we have this instant certainty, but Jesus invites us into this thoughtful compassion. So in our story, everyone's shouting. They're demanding an answer. They're holding stones in their hands, and Jesus kneels down. He doesn't get drawn into their urgency. He doesn't feed the outrage, and he refuses to be rushed. He just creates space. It's like he's saying, you don't have to choose sides. You can just choose silence. And sometimes the most Christ-like response is not to take a side, but to take a breath. We live in a culture that rewards speed, don't we? You know this. We listen to our podcasts at 1.5 to 2 times speed so that we can get through more and listen to them faster. We rush around from work to the game to the practice, back home. We're throwing Pop-Tarts in the back seat at the kids, calling it breakfast for dinner. This is how we fit it all in and get it all done. This culture craves binary black and white thinking. We want instant certainty and instant clarity and instant judgment. But Jesus teaches us to pause, to make room for grace before we speak. And then finally, he stands and he looks at the crowd and he says, "Let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." So pick up that rock that you grabbed when you walked in. Feel the weight of it. It might feel heavy in your hand. And now think, what does this rock represent for you? Maybe it's the rock of condemnation, bitterness, or shame. Maybe it's the rock of frustration, misunderstandings, or unforgiveness. Or is it the rock of judgment for others or from them? Perhaps it's the rock of being right and attempting to prove your worth and your value so that you can earn people's acceptance. Or is it the rock of resentment that you've just been carrying around for way too long? And even as you're sitting here, you can feel the bitterness and the anger rising in you. And then you hear Jesus say, "Let the one without sin cast the first stone." Suddenly that weight in your hand feels different, doesn't it? And the whole scene shifts. Because now the question isn't what should we do with her, it's what do I do with me? What will I do with my own heart? And this question changes everything. Because now it's no longer about someone else, it's about us. And what can we do? And then one by one, the rocks drop. And the people walk away. Until it's just Jesus. And he looks at this woman, and he doesn't excuse her sin, and he will expose hypocrisy. He doesn't deny the law, he fulfills it by revealing what the law truly came to do, and that is to give grace, getting what we don't deserve, and mercy, not getting what we do deserve. The third way is not compromise, it's compassion with conviction. When you recognize your own need for grace, you stop throwing stones and you start extending hands, because the third way is not pretending that sin doesn't matter. It matters, and Jesus addresses it, but it's realizing that people matter more. And he confronts her sin only after he communicates that he cares. So in our story, it says that after her accusers had walked away, Jesus looked at the woman and he asked, "Where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." That's the third way. That's grace and truth. Not grace without truth. That's permission. Not truth without grace, because that's punishment. But grace and truth together, that's transformation. The Pharisees wanted Jesus to pick their side and condemn the woman. The woman, although she never voiced it, desperately wanted Jesus to pardon her sin and let her just continue to live. But Jesus doesn't join the accusers or the accused. He stands right in the middle of them, between them. That's the third way, the Jesus way. So a few years ago, I was at a retreat in Montana, and I was sitting by a river in February, as you do when you're there, and I had picked up a rock that I was just kind of holding in my hand, and I was watching the river flow by me. But what I hadn't realized is that I had actually picked up multiple rocks. and I was physically squeezing them so hard in my hand that their jagged edges were leaving marks and breaking my skin. And each rock represented something heavy that I was holding on to. And instead of releasing that weight, I just kept accumulating more and more until I couldn't hold anything else. So grab your rock again and ask yourself, how many rocks am I actually trying to hold on to? What are they? Are they rocks of anger and bitterness and unforgiveness and frustration and condemnation and shame? Maybe for you, you've been holding on to these rocks for so long now that they're not even rocks anymore, but they're boulders that are weighing you down and holding you back. And while it seems like it would be best to just throw these at someone to relieve that pressure and that pain, the reality is that you just need to let them go. But how? Where do we go from here? How do we drop our rocks and find the third way? To be honest, I actually had to sit on this for a while because it's hard. It seems like we are hardwired for this binary thinking. And so it will take practice to recognize that it doesn't have to be black and white, this way or that way. It takes time to learn a new way, the third way. But here's what I think that we can do to start opening our hearts and our minds to that third way. The first thing we need to do is we need to lean in. We need to lean in with Jesus, and we need to lean in with other people. This means we're spending time with people that aren't like us. They have thoughts that don't align with our own, and they do life differently than we do. It doesn't mean that we are influenced in a negative way by them, but we're choosing to get close to someone who's not exactly like we are. Who is this for you? Who do you need to lean into? Is it that crazy mom at school pickup that you avoid because she's constantly running her mouth? Or the friend at school, or that coworker that you can't stand because you know where they stand on every single issue all the time, because that's all they talk about? And as we head into the holiday season, who's that family member with the strong opinions that dominates the conversation around the table every single time? What would happen if you just took a step towards them and invited them to coffee or to lunch? I'll admit, dinner feels a little ambitious as we're getting started here, so, take it slow. But take a step. Lean in and get a little closer. If you feel uncomfortable right now, good. Me too. Doing something different will feel uncomfortable in the beginning, but stay with me. What step do you need to take to lean in this week? Because the second thing that we need to do is listen to understand. Now, this might be difficult for some of us because isn't it so much easier just to assume that we already know instead of take the time to listen? Oftentimes, especially when we're passionate about something, we forget how to listen because we're so busy formulating our response and our argument. We are more interested in the debate rather than the discussion. But the thing is that we don't need to win arguments. We need to win people. I'll say that again. We don't need to win arguments. We need to win people. And this doesn't mean to win them over to our side. It means we win them over because they know we genuinely care about them. And we can show them that we care by actually listening without an agenda. We can sit and pay attention, and we can silence our own thoughts and focus on that face that's right in front of us. We can forego our own opinion, and we can keep listening. I don't know about you, but I actually get to practice this regularly with my family. And I have to remind myself to settle down and settle in and stay focused. Because sometimes there are so many words, and sometimes it's because my desire to insert my opinion keeps creeping in. But we can do this because it matters. Back in the olden days, after I graduated from college, I actually had the opportunity to work with middle school kids at our church. And if you ever want to practice listening, hang out with middle schoolers. It is great practice. And I know that I did a lot of nodding and a lot of, wow, I've never thought of that way before. But I find that that's such a helpful phrase when we don't know what to say in a loving way. Stay curious, ask clarifying questions without opinions attached. Which leads us to our third step that we can take on our journey toward third way thinking, and that is to learn their story. And to do that, we must lean in, and we must listen to understand, and we have to ask questions. As I was writing this message, I'll admit I was multitasking. I was texting with my daughter who's in college, who was having a difference of opinion with one of her professors. And I told her that she doesn't have to agree with everything that he says, but she can be respectful and she can ask questions. Be curious. How else can we truly know someone if we don't humbly ask to learn more about them? We don't have to prove that we're right, even if we know we're right. We just need to show people that we care. Maybe you've heard it said that people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. So who is this for you? The crazy thing is that it might actually be someone who's very close to you already. Someone you thought you know really well. This could actually be your spouse or your coworker, a friend, or even your kids. But if you really leaned in, and if you really listened, what would you learn about their story? It takes time and intention to create a safe space for people to feel vulnerable enough to open up and share their story. But it's so rewarding to hear about the life that you never knew that they had lived that is tucked in just beneath the surface. It's true that people are like onions, and there are so many layers to keep peeling away. But keep giving other people space to peel those layers back, and it helps you have more compassion and empathy when you learn their story. So ask someone this week, am I a safe place for you to share? Am I a safe person for you to be vulnerable with? And then finally, love them where they are. Jesus was so good at this. In fact, actually, as I think about it, he was so good at all of these. He spent time with people who were not like him and who no other teacher or rabbi of the time would have. He listened to them, he asked them questions, and he loved them right where they were, which I might argue might be the most difficult for most of us. To genuinely love someone who is not like us, no matter what our personal convictions are. Jesus never said, figure out your life and then follow me. He did say, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Jesus didn't throw stones. He showed us how to lay them down. I've gone through some rough patches in my life. I'm sure you have too. High school, college, as a young adult, even as a pastor. Where sometimes life just hits so hard and it feels like the weight of it is too much. But I can look back at all of these times and I can see the faces of those who found me in the dust and loved me right where I was. They loved me with tears of shame streaming down my face. They loved me while I was screaming and shouting in frustration and anger. They loved me when they watched me make decisions that they knew were going to hurt me. And they loved me while I asked endless questions out of fear and uncertainty. I can't imagine where I would be today without Andrea and Vicky and Donna and so many others who sat with me in the darkness and loved me where I was. So let me ask you, who has loved you that way? And who can you choose to love, no strings attached? The third way is not the easy way, but it is the better way. It's the way of Jesus. And it should be the way of those who follow him. Can you imagine what it would be like if the church was the one place in the world where people don't have to pick sides, where unity matters more than uniformity, where love outweighs labels? When the world says choose this side or that side, Jesus says, I have a third way, my way. Come and sit with me. Maybe, just maybe, the most extreme thing that we can do in a divided world is refuse to be divided. We're going to watch a short clip that illustrates Jesus choosing the third way. And while we watch this, I want you to pick up your rocks again and consider what it represents for you and what steps you can take to drop it instead of throw it.
This day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Mary, over here. Yay! The Lord commands us to stone such a woman. What do you say?
I'll give my stone to the first man who tells me that he has never sinned. Go and sin no more.
There's a powerful retelling of this story by Orson Scott Card, and it shows how most communities are going to swing between decay and rigidity. They're either going to be too soft or too harsh, and how rare it is to find that perfect balance of grace and truth. He imagined 3 rabbis faced with a woman caught in adultery and how each responded. So in the first story, a great rabbi stands teaching in the marketplace, and it so happens that a husband finds proof that morning of his wife's adultery, and a mob carries her to the marketplace to stone her to death. The rabbi walks forward to stand beside the woman. Out of respect for him, the mob forbears and waits with stones heavy in their hands. Is there anyone here, he asks, who has not desired another man's wife or another woman's husband? They all murmur and say, we know the desire, but Rabbi, none of us have acted on it. The rabbi says, then kneel down and give thanks that God made you strong. He takes the woman by the hand and leads her out of the marketplace, and just before he lets her go, he whispers to her, tell the Lord magistrate who saved his mistress. Then he'll know that I am his loyal servant. So the woman lives because the community is too corrupt to protect itself from disorder. In the second story, another rabbi, another city, and he goes to her and he stops the mob as in the other story, and he says, which of you is without sin? Let him cast the first stone. The people are abashed and forget their unity of purpose in the memory of their own individual sins. Someday they think, I may be like this woman and I'll hope for forgiveness and for another chance. I should treat her the way that I wish to be treated. And as they open their hands and let their stones fall to the ground, the rabbi picks up one of the stones and he lifts it high over the woman's head and he throws it straight down with all his might. It crushes her skull and her brains are dashed onto the cobblestones. Nor am I without sin, he says to the people. But if we only allow perfect people to enforce the law will soon be dead and our city with it. So the woman died because her community was too rigid to endure her deviance. And then Card says the famous version of this story is noteworthy because it is so startlingly rare in our experiences. Most communities lurch between decay and rigor mortis, and when they veer too far, they die. Only one rabbi dared to expect of us such a perfect balance that we could preserve the law and still forgive the deviation. So, of course, we killed him. But the good news, that rabbi, Jesus, he rose again, and he's still showing us the better way. Not this or that, but his way. Not either or. That's the world we live in, one that still kills anyone who dares to stand in the middle. We still struggle with that balance. We excuse too much or we condemn too quickly. But Jesus shows us another way, a way that tells the truth, but never without love. Maybe you came in today feeling caught like that woman, or critical like the crowd. Either way, Jesus meets you here. The question isn't whose side is he on, it's whether we'll step into his way. What stone could you drop this week? What if you replace judgment with grace, certainty with compassion, or reaction with pause? The third way, the way of grace and truth, the way of unity over division, the way of love, the Jesus way. Let's pray. Jesus, may we drop our rocks. May we listen to you, and may you help us find the third way. Not this way or that way, not black and white, not the world, but you, your way. Help us to remember that it doesn't have to be what we've thought. It can be something new and something different. Help us to find the third way. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's stand and sing.